Picture it. The year is 1920. A young journalist is sitting in his morning editorial meeting, and the editor is just rattling off addresses, names, numbers, these incredibly complex instructions for the day's assignments. But this one particular journalist, he isn't writing anything down. Literally not a single note. Wait,
He's just sitting there? Because that feels like a really quick way to get fired.
right? And that is exactly what the editor thought. So the editor finally snaps. He confronts the guy, completely expecting this frantic apology. But the young man just looks genuinely confused. He opens his mouth and he repeats the entire morning briefing back, word for word, completely flawless. So today, we are going to unpack a true story that unfolds, honestly, like a psychological thriller. It's the eerie anomaly of a man whose mind recorded absolutely everything.
So the editor was deeply unsettled by this. He actually sends the 29-year-old journalist to a clinic. And not because he was sick, but because the editor had just never seen anything like this in his entire life. And this brings our journalist to the office of a renowned Russian psychologist named Dr. Alexander Luria.
Okay, but if the journalist was so unbothered by the whole thing, why did he even agree to go to a clinic? I mean, I'd be kind of insulted.
And that right there is the profound misunderstanding at the center of this whole room. Because the journalist, his name was Solomon Shereshevsky, he walked into Dr. Luria's office completely relaxed. And the reason why? He assumed that every single human being possessed a flawless memory. He never took notes because he simply didn't need to. I mean, up until he was 29 years old, Solomon had absolutely no idea that for normal people, human memory actually fades.
No way, you're kidding. He made it all the way to 29 thinking everyone just remembered everything?
Exactly. He thought forgetting was this strange, rare phenomenon that only happened to broken people. He genuinely believed that the perfect, permanent retention of every word, every sound, every visual was just the baseline human experience. But he was about to learn the truth, because over the next 30 years, Dr. Luria would study Solomon, and what he documented would completely shatter our understanding of the human brain. We are not looking at some kind of biological gift today. We are looking at a psychological prison, a perfect memory that Solomon Shereshevsky would spend the rest of his agonizing life trying to escape. So let's get into section 1, the diagnosis, a mind with no off switch. Dr. Luria was obviously intrigued, and he began testing Solomon immediately. He started small, words, numbers, nonsense syllables. Solomon repeated them perfectly, every time. So Luria escalated. He started designing these cognitive challenges specifically built to break this man's concentration. At one point, he hands Solomon a grade of 70 random numbers, lets him read it exactly once, and then takes it away. 3 minutes later, he asks for the numbers back. Let me guess. He got every single one of them, right? Well, he didn't just recite them. He could visualize the grid so clearly in his mind that he could read the numbers backward. He could read them perfectly straight down the columns. He even read them diagonally across the grid without a single error.
Okay, that is completely impossible.
Diagonally? From memory? It completely defies logic. But mechanically it was possible because Solomon possessed the most documented case of synesthesia ever recorded in scientific history. Synesthesia is this condition where a stimulus in one sense involuntarily triggers an experience in another. But Solomon's case, it was extreme. Every single piece of data entering his brain was permanently encoded across 5 different sensory channels, all at once: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell.
Wait, hold on. So for every single word or number he heard, all 5 of his senses were firing off simultaneously? That sounds utterly exhausting.
It was physically violent. I mean, when you or I hear a word, we just hear the sound, right? But for Solomon, hearing a word was this overwhelming event. He saw a flash of a specific color, he felt a distinct texture against his skin, he tasted a specific flavor, and he smelled a distinct odor. Information wasn't just abstract code to him. Words and numbers were these heavy, physical, multi-sensory entities just crashing into his consciousness. I can't even begin to imagine trying to hold a normal conversation if every single syllable tasted or felt like something physical.
And it gets even stranger. Take the number 7, for example. When Solomon heard it, it wasn't a mathematical symbol. His brain permanently translated the sound of 7 into a very real physical presence. It was a severe man with a dark mustache, standing slightly to his left. Every single time he heard it, that exact man appeared in his mind's eye.
A severe man? Just for the number 7? That is incredibly bizarre. And it really never changed?
It never varied, not even once. And the number 8? That was a stout woman in a white dress with a pink bow. Because numbers and words were actual living personas to him, Forgetting a piece of information wouldn't just mean losing a random fact. For Solomon, forgetting a number would mean literally losing a person he knew.
Oh my God, that is horrifying. So he couldn't afford to forget anything because it felt like a tangible physical loss every single time.
Exactly. His memory wasn't necessarily stronger than ours in a traditional sense. It was just operating on this terrifyingly vivid, inescapable system that completely lacked an off switch.
Which brings us to section 2, the trap, how perfection becomes a prison.
This is the exact moment where the perceived superpower morphs into a looming threat. Because a mind that cannot filter out the noise is a mind destined to drown in it. Think about it. When we read, we extract abstract meaning, and our brains efficiently just let the specific words fade away. It's a biological survival mechanism to prevent overload. But Solomon couldn't extract abstract meaning. If you said the word nothing to a normal person, they grasp the abstract concept of absence. Solomon couldn't grasp nothing because his brain relentlessly conjured a vivid physical image just to fill the void. That is absolutely terrifying. He couldn't even visualize empty space without some image forcing its way in.
He couldn't do it. Dr. Luria captured this absolute claustrophobia perfectly. He wrote, his consciousness was like a room being slowly filled with objects that could never be removed. Wow, that actually gives me chills. Just the thought of being slowly buried alive by your own mind every single day.
And the real-world fallout for him was completely devastating. Solomon couldn't hold down a normal job. A basic, everyday conversation was nearly impossible because every spoken word triggered a blinding cascade of competing images. He couldn't even recognize his own friends reliably. If someone's facial expression changed even slightly from his permanent, rigid memory of them, the mismatch confused him entirely.
He couldn't even recognize his own friends. That is just so incredibly sad.
Yeah, he was essentially relegated to the fringes of society. He was forced to become a stage memonist, basically a circus act performing memory tricks for strangers, before retreating every single night to a dark apartment completely saturated with inescapable memories. Let's move to section 3, the desperate escape, manually deleting the mind. Surviving day-to-day became so agonizing for him that Solomon actually began inventing manual techniques to destroy his own memories. First, he tried writing a memory down on paper, hoping that he could just transfer it out of his brain. But the act of writing just created a brand new, vivid memory of the paper. So he began burning the papers. He would stare at the flames, literally willing his brain to let the memory turn to ash along with it.
Oh, man. A man staring at burning paper, just praying to forget. That is profoundly tragic.
And when the burning failed, he resorted to this heartbreaking internal visualization. He would imagine the memory written out on a mental chalkboard, and then he would imagine a sun so incredibly bright that it bleached the board completely white. It was this agonizing, manual attempt to delete his own files. Think about this. This man, possessing objectively the greatest memory in the history of scientific literature, spent his entire adult life deeply, bitterly envying you and me. He envied our ordinary, mundane ability to just let things go, to let an embarrassing moment fade away, to let a bitter argument soften over time, to let the sharp edges of grief naturally dull.
It completely flips everything we think about memory on its head. We always want to remember more, but he would have given literally anything just to forget.
From his discovery in 1920, through decades of performing on stage just to survive, Solomon Shereshevsky died in 1958. He passed away never having found the peace of a quiet mind. Dr. Luria eventually published a massive, world-famous case study about him. But Solomon never even read it. He simply couldn't bear to accumulate one more piece of permanent data.
He didn't even read his own life's work. That just breaks my heart.
Finally, section 4, the insight. Why we absolutely must forget. We live in a society that is so obsessed with optimizing our minds. We treat memory as a high score that we have to maximize at all costs. But Solomon's life forces us to confront a much harder truth. Forgetting is not a biological bug. It is a vital feature. Quote, forgetting is not a malfunction. It is how the mind digests, how it heals, how it moves. The things you lose over time, the exact texture of your worst moments, the precise sting of an insult, you lose them for a reason. Because without the ability to discard the past, you cannot possibly navigate the present.
It's literally a biological necessity. Forgetting isn't a flaw at all. It's the very thing that keeps us sane.
Exactly. So I want you to think about the fading, blurry edges of your own memory, the things you can no longer picture perfectly. What is one thing you are truly glad you've been able to forget?
That is a really powerful thought.
It really is our greatest unseen blessing.
Well, this concludes our explainer for today. Farewell.
Goodbye.